empirically, through experimentation, logic, and historical or cross-cultural parallel, all these efforts are struck down by these really simple statements that just kind of sound true. Sure, capitalism sucks, but that's because humans suck, so why should we believe socialism could be any better? Socialism is pie in the sky. It's hubris from young people who don't know how the world works yet. Just wait till you hit your 30s and you'll grow out of it. And I understand why this works. It's a convincing idea. Everyone has people in their life who are greedy, selfish jerks, and everyone can recognize the part of themselves that is a greedy, selfish jerk. It stands to reason that human nature has, at the very least, an element of selfishness and cruelty to it. But this has very little to do with socialism, and as a justification for capitalism, it's a very strange one. In this video, I'm not going to prove what human nature is or isn't. If you'd like to watch a video approaching this question from a biological perspective, go check out my buddy Dr. video from a couple months ago, where he breaks down the nature versus nurture debate using twin studies and emerging science on epigenetics. Like that, check out Andrewism's video about how different philosophical traditions have interpreted the human nature argument across time and space, and the kinds of society that flourish with different understandings of humanity. Two great videos, two very different approaches, two pretty similar conclusions. Human nature is not a very good argument. In this video, I'm going to take a third approach to this conclusion. We're going to be looking at how this idea of a singular, corrupt, logical, and self-interested human nature gains traction as a defense of capitalism, the inherent contradictions of this idea, and why it doesn't actually undermine socialist politics. And I know I'm fighting a stupid battle here. The human nature argument is one that takes like 3 seconds to make, that anti-socialists never feel like they have to justify. Except maybe by pointing to someone doing something bad and calling it proof, or relying on the assumption that if a past socialist experiment failed, it was because of human nature. Debunking this is going to take me many minutes, because I'm not going to take those easy shortcuts. Maybe that makes what I'm doing easier. Anyway, the first thing to address with a lot of these human nature claims is how rudely essentializing they are. For some reason, when human nature is invoked, it's always the part of human nature that sucks that we focus on, despite the fact that we have millions of examples of people being selfless.
Regroup. Let's dance.
People regularly make massive personal sacrifices before their brain even has the time to compute what kind of selfish benefit they might gain from it. There are plenty of documented cases of people jumping into a river to save a drowning stranger at the drop of a hat, and probably even more undocumented cases of the same thing. Hundreds of millions of hours are volunteered every year. Mutual aid networks exist throughout the world, and on a daily basis, you almost certainly do something kind for someone else. Tiny little selfless acts like opening a door for someone are almost invisible in our everyday life because they're so immediate and common. I'll admit these aren't the strongest arguments I've ever made on this channel, but the reason I'm not spending too much time on them is because, 1, as I'll flesh out later in the video, socialism doesn't require selflessness by any means. A socialist world could work even if it was filled with people who are fundamentally, ontologically greedy. And 2, before we even get to that, I have to point out that there's no reason to think people are more fundamentally greedy than they are generous. And even if we are more fundamentally greedy, the simple fact that selfishness and greed exist is not a justification for building an economic system that rewards that behavior. If you believe that humans are naturally selfish, rather than believing that it's something we're capable of and that we're equally capable of kindness, and most of the time we just flip-flop between the two, that's fine. I probably won't be able to convince you otherwise. But I won't spend too much time on that because no matter what you believe human nature is, it doesn't logically follow that selfishness and greed should be the ticket to wealth and power in our society. If you think we're all rotten to our core, you're going to need another piece of evidence or some other argument to prove to me that that means our society should reward those who take this to the extreme, that the most openly selfish and greedy of us deserve to be on top. My guess is those arguments aren't going to be very convincing. I don't know many people that believe society would be best served when selfish people are in charge and have more power to be selfish. But not all arguments about human nature as a justification for capitalism take this form. Instead of arguing for capitalism from the point of greed and selfishness, both of which have a negative connotation, some people claim that we are built for the profit-seeking trade that capitalism depends on, and that capitalism actually evolved out of this aspect of human nature. In The Wealth of Nations, Adam Smith, one of the first and most influential defenders of capitalism, wrote that there is, quote, a certain propensity in human nature, the propensity to truck, barter, and exchange one thing for another. Unlike animals, Smith says that humans are simply designed to exchange and compare and seek out the best deal. As a counterexample, Smith says, quote, nobody ever saw a dog make a fair and deliberate exchange of one bone for another with another dog. But we people, we're human because we are driven towards profit by trade, and therefore capitalism is just the inevitable social system that results from individual behaviors. The problem is that Smith just made this up. He made it up. He's not wrong that humans trade and that for the most part, animals don't. But all Smith did was see that people around him were trading goods for other goods or for currency. He saw that other animals weren't doing it, and so he essentialized it as part of human nature, basically on a whim. He assumed that this must be something humans are hardwired to do, and that we must have always done. In The Wealth of Nations, Smith imagines, which is to say he guesses, that the history of humanity is one where we start trading small goods with one another. I'll give you this thing for that thing. Then we figure out that this is inefficient as we specialize in our labor, and therefore we start creating currencies. First we use salt and leather to trade goods, and eventually we figure out precious metals work best because they travel well and you can standardize them. And eventually, quite naturally, you get a market system based on maximizing the amount of precious metals you have. This then becomes more complex and larger until you develop systems of debt and accounting. And soon enough, you have capitalism. If you've ever taken an Econ 101 class,